What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be going over my elemental tribal build for Magic Legends. Real quick, before we get started, make sure you leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Without further ado, let's get into it. So, elemental tribal build for the Magic Legends. I went blue and red colors. Reason being is because blue's avatar of Frost is really strong, and I find his special ability to stun nearby creatures happens a lot more frequently than some of the other summons. So I wanted to make space for him to get into it. Going through it, we have our water elemental for the pull. Now he's the only guy I'd like to replace for a lightning elemental. Unfortunately, I don't have that spell, so I'm making do with my water elemental here. Avatar Frost, really strong creature. Nothing more to say. When he summons, he's stunning nearby foes. We got our Earth Elemental for the taunts, and our Magma Colossus for the massive range damage and trample. So those are our creatures. Moving on to the spells. Now what I went for was this, a focus on Psionic Barrier. One bad thing about blue and red is that there's no way to keep your creatures alive, keep them healthy. They all have high health pools, relatively, but Psionic Barrier will make sure that they stay healthy and alive for a longer period of time. So for 42 seconds, creatures you control gain +3 health as long as you have 3 or more spells in your hand. So we're going to take that and keep it active using things like Thought Cadence and cycling through it. So moving through, we have Thought Cadence. Let me move on. For 33 seconds, whenever you cast a spell of a different type, meaning if you cast a creature, an enchantment, a sorcery, you'll draw another spell. So you'll always have another spell active to be cast. Magnetic Pulse deals a small amount of damage but pulls all enemies to a target location and roots them in place. This is a very nice combination with Magma Colossus. We have Psionic Shatter that also works well off of these pulls and crowd control effects. Deal a good amount of damage in a line, but it crits so long as someone is affected by a control effect and you draw a spell. I like Molten Shell just because it's more defense, and as you get into the higher difficulties, temporary HP becomes a bit more useful. Also, you're dealing damage over time for a relatively high amount of damage for 10 seconds to all nearby foes. If we're running an Elemental Tribal deck, you gotta have Elemental Shatter. It creates a hazard at a spot. It summons essentially another Earth Elemental that taunts everyone and then explodes. Now, Fatal Frenzy is almost like the switch in here. I have this here. I constantly switch it out or put something else in, but I find Fatal Frenzy is the best because it gives your highest, strongest creature, which 90% of the time is going to be your Magma Colossus. It gives him plus X for 10 seconds, where X is his power. So it just doubles his power. It makes him a 12/4. And it's sacrificed after 10 seconds in this case. That 12/4 is dealing trample so long as you keep enemies away from him. So that's a pretty big heavy hitter. I put Lightning Strike here just as a filler, something to quickly cycle through our hand. This is the general idea of the build. I like it. I actually saw it happen while I pull up the artifacts. I actually saw the creatures solo one of the bosses of the dungeon by themselves because for some reason I was locked in a stun. Anyway, moving on. I'm getting distracted. Artifacts. I like the Implement of Combustion. The artifacts in general aren't really that important, especially the legendary one. You can fill it with just about anything. I like Implement of Combustion just for more damage over time effects. You could just as easily go Whip or even Goblin Supply Manifest, Thorn by Altar. All of these are good choices. Orb of Shiv, though, I highly recommend. Orb of Shiv, just to take a second, Orb of Shiv is one of the best relics and or artifacts in the whole game. If you don't have it, I recommend you get it. It's part of just leveling up your overworld affinity, right? Just making sure you get the reward for Shiv. Like, it's so useful for any creature focused deck or anything that has a creature in it. They cast Molten Shell for 10 seconds. Your sorceries are stronger, and the rank of Molten Shell increases for each sorcery in your deck. Excuse me for a second. Someone needs to die. Just a little basic attacks. Okay, now that interruption is over, let's go back to finishing off the build. Looking at equipment, I didn't really do anything for equipment. So this deck doesn't really use a lot of equipment focus. There are probably things that could be thrown in to make it better, like if you have a way to boost the red health of your creatures from this. I don't think there is, but you get the idea. Anything complementary to having creatures on the battlefield, maybe a way to give them indestructibility once I unlock it. Goodness, Benalia. So close. Oh, there you go. Nope. That one, the gauntlets. The gauntlets. Anyway, I'm rambling. Excuse me. It's quite early in the morning when I'm recording this. So, finishing off my thoughts before I go on another tangent. Geomancer is the class that I went for. I wanted Mind Mage. I haven't unlocked it, obviously, but I wanted to do Mind Mage because I like the idea of a floating mage summoning elementals to fight for him. But Geomancer just wins out because of the temporary hit points, once again, as well as his ultimate, his Sparks ultimate, that turns him into an Obsidian Elemental, which works very well into the Elemental Tribal build. So, I'm going to pause the video now, and we're going to get back into it when we start a skirmish to show off the build. Alrighty, we are back here in Shiv, about to start this skirmish, Caravan Defense, and maybe if he's still there afterwards, hit the Mythic Encounter. So, getting into it, just to show off. Start by summoning one of your elementals. Now notice, this is supposed to be a frost elemental, but he's encased in a molten shell. I think it looks cool. And the fact that he just explodes constantly just makes it better. Playing this on hard difficulty, I should probably eventually turn up the... I'm sorry, are you banishing the caravan that I'm supposed to be protecting? Earth elemental to start distracting people. Water elemental to pull people in. You guys get the idea. It's elementals. It's fun. I enjoy it. Like I mentioned earlier, this deck is actually deceptively strong too. It almost sold Josu Vess on hard difficulty because I got, for some reason, glitched out and just like floated in the air while my elementals did work, and they almost killed him, but unfortunately I died before they can kill him for me. So it carries itself pretty well. You can see we have all the elementals out on the board. They're just going around being destructive powerhouses. Throw down elemental shatter, pull people in, and then explode for big damage. I just want to show off this one, Fatal Frenzy. So notice he's big now, and he's far away from everyone else, so he's just dealing massive trample damage. He dies after a couple seconds, but with the way we're drawing spells in this deck, we are probably going to see him sooner rather than later. Now, while my elementals do what they do, I'll say one last thing before I let you guys go. Currently, there's an event going on that I'm not drawing any of the creatures in my deck. That's not the end of the world. That doesn't change this build at all, actually. As a matter of fact, I think it might even hamper it, because I sometimes want to summon my water elemental again to pull them in. So don't be confused when you make this deck. If you make this deck and it has creatures coming up, because maybe you guys might have been like, why are there no creatures coming up on your spell list? Well, that's why. Once again, thanks for checking me out. This was Elemental Tribal. If you liked the video, dislike the video, whatever, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.